Hi, this is DJ Officer Bad Guy here to address a class. This is the first class of several. The name DJ Officer Bad Guy is just descriptive of some creative stuff. The officer part, I'm referring to hip hop and protecting its preservation, and the bad guy part is the music. I have radio stations, and I'm trying to present to you all the baddest tracks, such as in good tracks, on my radio shows. But today, this class is going to discuss a problem going on with a lot of confusion nowadays as to what is hip hop, what happened. We're going to travel back in time to the 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s to examine what happened to bring it to 2016 and cause so much confusion today. When the hip hop is used, we're in a time where you almost never actually are dealing with it in terms of mainstream media, and even some media online, such as World Star Pop, reality TV shows, just all kind of music. We're at a time where the musicianship, the genre-defining musicianship that African Americans had created to become hip hop, has been sort of lost, buried, and even exiled off of mainstream radio. So this class is going to focus on clearing up confusion and fog to get down to what happened, why are there two industries today, one that is very visible and one it's very hard to find. And the one that's very hard to find just so happens to carry the sound, the genre-defining sound characteristics of the genre as it's understood, regardless of if the old artists are from the 80s or 90s or even the 2000s, if they're brand new. It doesn't matter. The sound characteristics of the genre do not change. No different than orchestra, classical, you name it. Of course, there are subgenres, and subgenres can come from a genre, but mainly that happens with a lot of different mechanics at work, some of which are corporately designed. Also, a lack of knowledge. So let's go back in time and start. Once upon a time, there was no such thing as hip hop. It was just jazz, R&B, soul, rock, heavy metal, reggae, and several other forms of music. Hip hop was a culture that began in New York City with people experimenting with turntables and being able to loop 70s albums to make a syncopated rhythm track. A syncopated rhythm is different than a don't chut. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Syncopated rhythm is more like this. But chut has a double hit 2 times in the beat. Today we have tracks that sound more like that's what these major companies are calling hip hop. That's trap music. Trap music is not hip hop. We're gonna go to a time where trap didn't exist, and all that existed was hip hop. So when hip hop started, we were coming out of the 70s, and you had a lot of different songs, a disco era, excuse me, and there were certain syncopated rhythms showing up in jazz, showing up in disco, but no one really started to actually rhyme over them until the late 70s, early 80s. So, long story short, all of a sudden you get this new art form that comes out of people having fun in the parks with microphones, scratching, break dancing, and then MCing, which is a higher level than just rapping. I would say, to use an example, if you think of bumper cars, to me bumper cars are like rapping when it comes to how hard or easy it is to do. MCing is more like intellectual racing. It's more like an actual race car. It's harder to do, even if one is not familiar with what hip hop is. It will be obvious to them when they see it executed that it actually takes more thought. It's much harder to do. Rapping is easy. songs such as "Every Day I'm Hustling." That's a very easy thing to do. No disrespect to any of the artists out there, mainstream or not. So a long time ago, the major companies were going for hip hop, such as Def Jam. It was a phenomenon that radio stations, they were independently owned and run, were going after. And the golden age refers to this time where hip hop was at an artistic high. Songs could range from fighting against the government. They became popular to injustice, to having fun, to being intelligent, such as My Philosophy by KRS-One. The tracks also were very different at the time. They were dominating the radio. They were dominating video. They were dominating the club scene. And this was nationwide. This wasn't just in the North. This spread out throughout the South, spread out throughout the Central America and the West and Midwest. And it was understood, even so much as far as certain movies such as Ghostbusters 2. Ghostbusters 2 had Run DMC for the Ghostbusters theme. They had Spirit by Dougie Fresh. And even in major films, that was syncopated rhythm. I think Dougie Fresh's drum pattern was it was understood what the rhythm was about and how to dance to it. He was talking about spirits in that song, and it was one of the most successful songs back then, just regular sound in hip hop. So around the time of KRS-One, Kool Moe Dee, Queen Latifah, a lot of those early artists, the self-destruction movement against violence, talking about you're headed for self-destruction, where all of them got together in one video. Many people probably in their mid to late 30s and up can recall, and especially in their 40s can recall this era. It was really huge. There was a time where people were buying nothing but KRS-One, EPMD, Queen Latifah, Redman, Das Effects, going all the way into about early 90s Tribe Called Quest. I can't name every single artist, but the radio was filled with this new creativity. So just getting into the golden age, it was understood. Hip-hop was making money. It was huge. And by the time it hit 1995, it was a zenith. It was a high of creativity where it sent many people to the store to buy so many different albums. I think at the time, Wu-Tang had 3 solo members out in 1 year at separate times: Old Dirty, Raekwon, and Genius. Biggie had come out and established his lyrical weight. Nas had come out. Boot Camp Click, whether they were well known or not, it was just a time of illustrious creativity. The list is so long, from Souls of Mischief to The Far Side to EPMD to Mike Geronimo, Boot Camp Click, Smith and Wesson, Black Moon, Bahamadia, Smooth the Hustler, R.A. the Rugged Man, Trigger the Gambler, Nine, Bahamadia, the youngsters, Illy Funksters. It just keeps going and going and going. The Fugees, Redman. It was almost a never-ending list. There are several West Coast artists as well: Ice Cube, N.W.A., and it was taken by storm. And even the boom bap sound was mostly still syncopated, not all the time, but most of the time, even in the West Coast. Eventually, there was a company that showed up, and the timing of the company, I think, was very suspicious when they had these false incidents known as the East versus West battles. The reason why I say it's a false incident, it never happened, is because there never was an entire coast of artists aiming at the other coast. That never happened. There was just one or two artists or groups, one artist or group that made songs about certain artists, not all, in other coasts. That was only a few people, such as Tupac, maybe Dog Pound, Mobb Deep, and they only aimed it at maybe one or two groups or a few names. It was not an event. It was a media-inspired hoax, I believe, to try to pit artists against each other and fans. It really did not occur. There were, like I said, just a few artists that were upset, a couple artists that were upset with each other, and they did not attack entire coasts. That did not happen. So when this company Clear Channel formed, at the time everybody was still golden aging, recording songs off the radio. KRS-One, Redman, Biggie, Tupac, Wu-Tang Clan, Method Man, Smith & Wesson, Black Moon, Buckshot, so many names, Al Tariq, the Beat Nuts. There's no way I can cover the names in this discussion, but just in terms of what happened before all of a sudden there became two industries, one that you can't see anymore. Everybody was dancing and had the same knowledge. There was no such thing as artists that you couldn't see. BET Rhapsody was playing them. MTV was playing them. It was very normal to know the face of a name brought up in discussion. If someone said J. Rue the Damager, everybody knew his face and some lyrics or a song or two. Or at least if they didn't know a song or two, they knew who he was or they had heard of that person. Same thing with The Genius. Same thing with Hieroglyphics, Dell. Not to go into that too much, but pretty much the masses were all seeing the same thing, almost like going to one store. So all of a sudden, this company forms. It was a car company at first that wanted to go into the radio business. So these two older men sold the car company. They managed to have their businessmen in suit and ties go to their right-wing colleagues in Congress, get a law changed. I believe it was competition law. Get that removed, and then it allowed them to implement what was called the Telecommunications Act. The Telecommunications Act sounds like it's talking about telephones and things of that nature. That is incorrect. The Telecommunications Act is a bill. Telecommunications Act is a bill that actually had a lot to do with stopping the cap on how many businesses could run a certain product. So, example, there was a previously illegal amount of radio stations one company was permitted to control. That's why the radio stations were free to have DJs to play a much bigger variety of music than what the generations are experiencing today, which might be barely 10 artists on a radio station. So what they did was they changed it so that Clear Channel would legally be able to own over 160 radio stations countrywide. This is probably the beginning of how everything got so bad today. Once the bill went through and they were able to be legally permitted to own that number of stations, they sent these businessmen with wads of money into their hand to the existing radio stations. And unfortunately, these stations accepted the money, and then they bought radio stations all over the United States of America without changing the name. Some of these stations, if not all of them, when they were purchased by Clear Channel, they didn't change the name of the station. So, for example, Philadelphia's Power 99 FM is still called the same name. I'm sure many stations in the South, West, and East had the same name, maybe even the same DJs. Some of the DJs didn't like it and left. I heard a DJ in Philadelphia said that a change is coming. He didn't like it, and he was encouraging listeners to write down the names of everybody that they liked, whether they had bought an album from those artists or not, because things are about to change. So they had to take their crates nationwide and leave, and even eventually it would affect the videos because of Viacom's purchase of BET, MTV, and VH1. So this is why, if folks can go back and remember, probably around 96, 97, you went from hearing people like Jay the Damager, Mobb Deep, KRS-One, Wu-Tang Clan, Hieroglyphics, Common, who at the time was called Common Sense, and many, many, many others, to all of a sudden seeing Trick Daddy, Trina, Juvenile, Nelly, Lil Wayne, and just a lot of people who had such a different sound. It's almost like somebody going to a spaghetti restaurant, and then all of a sudden, when they order spaghetti, it's ramen noodles, and the waiters and the restaurant are acting like that spaghetti. They're still calling it spaghetti. So you just went from all this consciousness and a different sound to an entirely different type of lyrics, an entirely different type of sound nationwide, and the masses, millions and millions and millions of people, were unable to do anything about it. Matter of fact, many people got the impression that the artists that they used to hear left or quit, or they just stopped making music. And it was unbelievable, because many of those artists had gone platinum, that they had removed from the radio for no reason. Wu-Tang Clan had gone 2 times platinum. Solo projects from Wu-Tang had been platinum. Method Man, Old Dirty, Raekwon. I mean, it wasn't believable. And all of a sudden, these people who had no resume, no history, this Southern red light district type of music that's more meant to accompany dancers and adult entertainment clubs, with the twerking and the moving and the way the track sounds, i.e. club rap, auto-tune, crunk, and snap or trap. That was what these companies put out all of a sudden. They didn't ask anybody. They never did any kind of data research. They just put it there and removed the hip-hop. But award shows, video shows, radio shows, magazines, including The Source, they all continued to call this new genre hip-hop, while they took hip-hop away. I could have easily been like everybody else, and most people who couldn't find it and just gave up and accepted it, or was angry and just didn't listen to any type of rap anymore, or just didn't know that hip-hop still existed. So I got lucky, and I met a friend at college, and she told me that the college radio station where I was in Atlanta actually continued playing the hip-hop that they removed. So I found out that college radio stations in the late 90s were the only way, if anybody had stations like that in their area for a long time, to deal with where to go. So almost like a store, if you had a restaurant, if you were enjoying some good chicken or some good spaghetti, and all of a sudden the restaurant continued to give you plates, and they would say it was chicken or spaghetti, but all you're getting is ramen noodles or something you didn't ask for, besides the chicken. Maybe you're asking for chicken and they're giving you potato chips. But regardless, I felt like an individual that found another place to go to find that, to find the correct item behind the label. So in other words, when I listened to college radio, I knew I was going to get hip hop. I knew I was going to get the continuation of J. Rue the Damager, all the people, Wu-Tang, Nas. I was going to, and even newer people who hadn't been out when they came out, who studied it. So I knew I was on the right channel, if you think of it like television. I knew this is a college radio station, and it only airs late on Sunday nights, but I found it. And that was the way some people, not all, had a chance to keep up. There were some DJs who tried to do what they could, such as Stretch and Bobbito. I don't know much about them. I haven't done much of my research, but they were known in New York as trying to have radio shows to keep people in tune with actual hip-hop music. So you have the beginning of two entirely different industries here. They do not sound the same. One started in the South. The other started in the inner city of New York, trains going by. Even if you think of the that almost sounds like the DJs had traveled on trains and listened to the way the train sounds in the subway to come up with that. And trap has a totally different sound. So that was the big change. Around 97 and 98, you had a total, almost a upside down event where the visible hip hop all of a sudden went underground, and this trap that nobody had ever heard before was visible. Once again, Trick Daddy, Trina, Master P, more player type images, money being thrown all over the place, no depth of lyrics, no type of songs that really touched on anything else besides what you have, how much money you have, how much fun you're having, how many girls you have. The tracks to me were not really that impressive for it to be called hip hop, I'll say. I think it would have been better if the companies decided to actually give them the name that a lot of Southerners use, such as crunk rap or club rap or trap rap or something else besides hip hop. Hip hop is too specific and had already, the recipe for what that sounds like had already been defined. And somebody might say, well, you can't dictate what hip hop sounds like, but at the same time, that's like saying you can't dictate what spaghetti is. There's many different types of ways to make spaghetti, but there's some things you have to keep there. And if spaghetti was successful for 10, 15 years, you as a big restaurant can't trick people and not have the basic sauce, the basic beef, meatballs, or whatever kind of ground meat you put in it in the spaghetti sauce. Some things you have to keep, even if you add Italian spices on this one, different spices on another, different cultured spaghetti, but there's still some things that have to come with it. Hip hop is the same. The beats are called break beats. So break beats must be present. There's different types of break beats. There's even hybrid tracks, but for something to be considered hip hop, it cannot deviate to the point of triplet snares, such as artists like Drake, or who sings. He's not even rapping, even though rapping is still not MCing. MCing is hip hop, but just the mislabeling crisis. So masses of people see these award shows and they see these artists, and I'm not blaming those artists. They don't control the big companies. They don't control the radio, but they have created a new genre that's getting the wrong label. It's trap. They should call it the Trap Awards, in my opinion. And some might say, well, that's not fair. Yeah, but it's not fair that people can't see the continuation of hip hop that really were enjoying themselves. So you can't justify a restaurant stopping something and tell those people they need to accept the ramen noodles. Nah, some people want to get their spaghetti. So long story short, that's the beginning of the two industries. Underground hip hop is the exiled hip hop that used to be all over the radio. It's the continuation of the hip hop that was inexplicably removed from mainstream FM, from MTV, from BET. It is the continuation of that sound. That is what's meant when people say the underground hip hop industry. And there's YouTubes, there's online radio shows, college radio shows still exist, but with some of these shows, the DJs are from another generation, and sometimes they may include some of this activity that's not hip hop. I have radio shows on Spotify that track the continuation of the hip hop industry. And I also have timelines on my radio station so that you can see that the sound of the underground hip hop industry is the official continuation of the mainstream hip hop of the 90s. So if you can see in the YouTube display, the industry on the left is actually a new genre. Mainstream rap is a new genre. If you look to the right in this picture in the YouTube, that industry represents the actual hip-hop industry in the way that it has always sounded, the way that African Americans intended it to sound, lyrically, beat-wise. That was in the spotlight first. Then if you imagine some villainous music and Clear Channel comes up to make changes, they took that industry, told it to leave, told it to go underground, removed it, never gave explanation, took this new industry and put it in front of people, and then started to call that industry hip hop. This is a bad corporate error. It actually gives places like Spotify, Pandora, and people like me an opportunity to capitalize off of their error and gain credibility with pretty large audiences on showing them where hip hop actually is. So if there was a guy who showed up and he was standing outside of a restaurant that some people were walking out of, and he was asking the people that looked frustrated, what's wrong? And the people said, man, this restaurant used to give us spaghetti when they say they had it. Now they say they have spaghetti and it's ramen noodles, and I'm upset. It's been years since I've had spaghetti. I can't find a place that sells it. So the guys outside, if they tracked where it is, they could say, look, I can give you directions on where to find a store that actually gets it right. That's sort of what Spotify, Pandora, and an individual like myself, that's what we're doing. We're able to give people the accurate information necessary to get back to the show. So long story short, it is a situation that we have where masses are incorrectly thinking that they are seeing the continuation of the 90s in trap music, where they're actually seeing the birth and beginning of an entirely different genre that has nothing to do with the continuation of hip-hop. Hip-hop has an entirely different roster, almost like sports, of artists that are from the 90s, and even of new artists. Even if you took the brand new artist from hip-hop in the way that it actually sounds and had them stare eye to eye with the new artist of trap, you'd still see it's a totally different genre. Stores will also do things like put rap/hip-hop, and then they put it all in the same section. My opinion is, if you're going to remove hip-hop and not give us any explanation, you need to let hip-hop at least have its accuracy. So in other words, people don't need to be confused. You at least owe the fans a chance to know what they're doing when they want to get hip-hop. And because trap is the new choice, that should be separate. There should be a separate section for anybody who's not following the musical rules of hip-hop. I don't know why the industries are set on using the term hip-hop for award shows when there's no hip-hop inside. I think Kendrick Lamar had one song. He got a Grammy, The Black of the Berry, and I believe that song fit the recipe for hip-hop. But some people might have a song or two, and the rest of their track does not fit that. So I think that mainstream has become very misleading, and I've created this series on YouTube to try to assist people who have lost faith or maybe been upset, or even if they're from the new generation and they keep hearing about this other industry and they're interested in being accurate. Or even if you're from a generation's back, baby boom, and you're not, you don't really know too much or not attached to whether it's real hip hop or trap, but you might be interested to see what's going on here to cause two different things happen in two different audiences. What is this guy talking about? You may be interested in continuing this YouTube series. There's actually no documentary, no artists, no magazine that I know of. There's no one having this discussion in a way that could teach your average person that's just trying to buy a quality album. I'm going to cover some more later, but I want people to understand the difference of what they see and what they hear in actual hip-hop music. There's a reason why it sounds the way it does, even if it's brand new. I think Cannibal Ox and Self Scientific, they're perfect examples of brand new groups that have a futuristic sound, and they follow the rules of hip-hop. If you listen to Cannibal Ox Iron Galaxy on YouTube, no tricky spelling, just Cannibal Ox. The name is just referring to them eating up lyrical competition, not literally being a cannibal. Self-Scientific, two separate words, sub-level dominance. Those two songs, there's more songs than that, but those are excellent examples of new groups that are very recent in hip hop that have a futuristic new sound, but they're following the hip hop rules, so it doesn't sound old. Some people use the term old school. I disagree. There's no, you can't, orchestra music doesn't have an old, people calling it old school. Orchestra music continues in movies and things like that. So why, I hear that term a lot, even though I know it's not necessarily used always in a bad way. I don't think everybody using it intends that, but I think it for some people it's a dismissive term. I would just say break beats must be present for something to be considered hip hop. There's also a lot of misinformation out there. I would say be careful of World Star Hip Hop. I nicknamed it World Trash Fake Hop. Or World Star No Real Hip Hop in Sight. Even if there is one song every now and then, it seems to be a story that has mostly trap mislabeled as hip hop. I would also be careful of talk shows, The Breakfast Club, anything on television. Many times they'll use the term award shows, to the Source magazine. The people on the cover do not carry the sound. It's just a shame, that this mislabeling crisis is happening. Now, to flip the script, you want to go to www.undergroundhiphop.com. You want to go to sandboxautomatic.com. Those sites will show you the underground hip-hop industry, or the industry that reflects the true sound of the genre. It's a totally different channel. I have radio shows on Spotify. I'll put the links beneath this YouTube for you all to see. I'll also include links from the 80s and 90s so that if you want to take a timeline journey and go from the 80s and 90s to the 2000s, I will show you how the industry is separate. I'll show you the newcomers that are in the actual hip-hop industry. Planet Asia, Self Scientific, Cannibal Ox, Bronze Nazareth, Wiseman, Rhapsody, Nitty Scott MC, Sage Infinite, Rosewood. I mean, there's a whole nother, and they have songs, videos, and interviews on YouTube. Some of the camera quality is just as good as any other mainstream artist. There's songs that have more notoriety than people think. Nas, for example, he has a song called Daughters. It has, I think, almost 7 million views. So sometimes the numbers on real hip-hop are huge because people are shocked to find it, and it carries weight that tells people how much it was selling in the 90s. There's a graph, I might put it on another YouTube, that shows that the trap of today, the industry is making $10 billion less than the hip-hop industry of the 90s. That was accurate. I'm not saying everything in the 90s was perfect, but I'm just saying that you had MC Hammer. You had people who deviated. It wasn't trap, but it wasn't hip-hop either. You had Puff Daddy sampling Diana Ross, and many other things like that. Okay, so just to review what we've talked about at 33 minutes, I'm going to try to keep these a little shorter in the future. But you had the 80s and 90s. You had the beginning of hip hop. You had the labels and radio stations were independently run. You had DJs at MTV such as Funkmaster Flex, Ed Lover, radio stations all over the country, DJs that were playing actual hip hop. You had a company show up, change the laws, Clear Channel, make it legal to own over 160 stations, get rid of the hip hop with no explanation given, and today you have this industry where they take 18-wheeler trucks and literally executives choose people like Young Thug, or they have a payola system, but they've banned hip hop. They will only accept this other construct, and I think that's disturbing. I don't wish any ill fortune on mainstream artists or anything, but I think we're at a time where this kind of information it might start to become valuable. And I hope you enjoyed this class, and I'll leave some links below to my radio stations so you could track the underground hip hop industry. All right, more later. Thank you very much.